Welcome everybody to this event at Impakt called Full Spectrum Citizenship. My name is Ilge Mignon and I'm happy to see you all here. Some of you were personally very much, let's say, encouraged to come because of a certain connection to this topic tonight. Others were happily, thank you, let's say, attending by hopefully our newsletters. This evening will be around about Thiago Hersan's residency at Impakt. He worked here for the past 2 months. However, well, Thiago is Brazilian-born, US-based, but currently also resident artist at Liverpool's Facts, and so that makes him a little bit of a world traveler. And also, he was in Mexico in the past few weeks, so he's kind of all over the place. Maybe in the first place, a world citizen, I suppose. We're here to close off his residency and to talk about some topics in his work. Thiago will have an artist talk explaining this very exciting term, full spectrum citizenship. And he will serve as a main course, so to say. And afterwards, we will have a little treat by Erik Kluitenberg and Mark Tutors, who will have a small, well, let's say, response to Thiago's work and the issues raised by means of their own work. And afterwards, I hope to encourage you all to kind of partake in the conversation and a public talk that we'll have about issues such as, well, let's say, raised in Thiago's work. Tactical media is a term that we often use for this. To briefly introduce Thiago, his work is mainly focused on communication networks and what he calls the cyber technological, or the internet, and mainly, I think, the use of technologies in a way that they weren't designed to be used. And so I will give the word to Thiago, who will talk about 30 minutes, for about 30 minutes about his work. And afterwards we'll have a little Q&A. Okay, welcome, Thiago.
Thanks, Ilge, and thanks everybody for coming. Let me just get the... Okay. So yeah, it's kind of bittersweet. This is the end of the residency. I almost don't want to give the talk because then it means I have to go away. Because it was very nice to be here in Utrecht. I could actually get work done. Like being in Mexico, São Paulo, it's just too much happening. And like Ilge said, this is what I'll be talking about today. It's kind of my first time in the Netherlands, so I thought this would be a good way to introduce my work and a little bit of the background, social, personal, of some of the work that I do, which is something I'm kind of calling full spectrum citizenship, which I'll explain what it means. It's based on a term called full spectrum dominance, on the term full spectrum dominance. And if you're like me and you like reading reports from the US military and right-wing think tanks, you might have seen this term before. It's usually accompanied by very nice pictures of airplanes shooting each other. It's surprising how an army with billions of dollars can get away using PowerPoint to plan their invasions. But anyway, the term, and so if you do read the Department of Defense dictionary of military terms, they define full spectrum dominance as a military entity's achievement of control over all dimensions of the battle space, effectively possessing an overwhelming diversity of resources in areas like terrestrial, aerial, maritime, subterranean, extraterrestrial, psychological, biological, or cyber technological, which I think they mean internet and your cell phones, in order to permit the conduct of joint operations without effective opposition, blah, blah, like they can go and just take over a country. And obviously I don't compete with them. I don't have the resources to go into all of these, but some of these are part of our day-to-day, right? Biological, psychological, cyber technological. And given my background and interests, I tend to focus on some of them, like cyber technological. And I think it's important to have, like Ilse mentioned, that I do these non-traditional uses of technology. I think it's important to develop these languages and use them, not just as products, because to show presence in these spaces, right? Today it's the internet, tomorrow it's biological systems. So this is sort of where my work is situated, and I'll show some examples of projects. A very early example of something kind of silly, but in 2010, I wrote an app that allowed me to turn text into distorted words. So just like CAPTCHA, like the companies use to make sure you're not a robot, I used it to make sure that they weren't reading my messages and turning it into commercials or advertisement. And some friends said, this isn't really keeping anyone from reading your stuff. It's not cryptography, and it's not, but it was a way for me to just feel like I had some control over that way of communicating. And something that's sort of funny that I looked up just a couple of days ago, if you look at the list of places where the app was downloaded, Iraq is number 3. I'd like to think that that's how Saddam was sending messages to people, but it was most likely US military there that downloaded this. I'm not sure why. Maybe they were worried that I was competing with them or posed a threat. I never got any weird emails or anything about this. I did get kicked out of Facebook, but I don't think it was political. It was just I was posting too many pictures. And so this was like my intro into sort of using technology for marking my presence and feeling like I'm not just a consumer. Now it's 2011, a little context into background of what was happening in Brazil. Summer of 2011, Occupy Wall Street was happening. We didn't really have a reason to occupy a Wall Street in Brazil, but different groups in different cities were thinking about uses of public spaces, how to, the lack of places for leisure in cities, and started organizing little occupations on the weekends of different public spaces. So this is in Belo Horizonte. It's in front of the train station. Belo Horizonte is kind of the biggest city in Brazil without a beach. So people said, let's pretend we have a beach there. And just show up on the weekends and sort of take over that public space. And of course, local government tried to make this illegal, but it wasn't just there that this happened. In São Paulo, there were these groups that used an overpass as a park on the weekends. So they would go, put fake grass, have parties, pool. And their group that organized this had this motto of the streets are for dancing. And threw a little festival around the theme as well. Another event in São Paulo underneath the high pass was little cinema that people would put on the street and get together. So again, like, I don't think it was directly this, we're occupying our Wall Street, but it was, I think it's part of this same narrative of occupying public spaces, but for our own kind of needs, let's say, or issues. Very fun ones, I guess, compared to. And so at that time, with a friend, we built this structure made up of 4 megaphones and a cell phone that was able to receive text messages or tweets, and it would just speak the tweet out loud. And again, because these events had more the feel of a party than a protest, people would use it as a place to meet other people or to flirt, send little obscene messages to each other. But it was definitely a way of sort of translating these virtual messages into something happening there physically. Had some consequence if you told someone to something, we flirted with them and they knew who was doing it. So had this idea of making it a little bit more effective or tangible digital communication. And around that same time, there's this collective in Mexico that was working on similar themes of repurposing or reinterpreting networks, let's say, where we think it's, and that's the name of the collective, Astrovandelistas. We think it's important to have communication networks. That's how a lot of those events in Brazil got big and got people to go out to the street, was through these networks. Good to have them, it's good to be able to communicate, but are they representative of all our communication needs or all of our, So what we do is we try to augment these networks, whether it's Twitter, SMS, the internet, with different kinds of input or output interfaces, as we call them, or prototypes that have another more specific significance to a place. I'll give an example. In 2012, we took over this structure, and you can kind of get the scale of it on the picture on the left. This is a human. And I think this used to be used to hang publicity posters, advertisement, and that became illegal at some point. But this is right in front of a military base in Mexico City that at the time had been, there was a lot of public discussion about their actuation in the city. Why do we have such a military base in the city? It's also near this beautiful park with a cultural center and a museum. So it's just, interesting place to have a military base, but Mexico also has a very active war on drugs right now. So anyways, there's a lot of discussions and kind of tweet protests happening around this at the time. And what we did is we put a washing machine motor in the center of this thing, attached it to kind of these metal curtains. And every time a tweet about this base came in, it would jiggle and make a lot of noise. So we called it the Telematic sound weapon. And I have a little video about it just to get a, wait. And so that lasted for about a couple of weeks until it got kicked out. But even after it was off, although we kind of did take over someone's hashtag, I guess, people kept tweeting using that hashtag, expecting the machine to be there. And so it kind of kept some, we would like to think, some discussion around the base going after it had lived its course. And we thought, yeah, this is good. We used Twitter to make some noise, but again, thinking of who's controlling the networks, who's behind all the stuff that we're using, we had this other idea for another project in 2014 that we called the project is called This Is Not the Internet, but to do it, we created this fake government agency called the Commission for the Discussion of Intangible Public Space. We had some meetings, workshops with journalists and writers, other artists, activists, and we made a website that has some information about the state of the telecom industry in Mexico, some stuff about where your data is going, some links to NSA, documents and presentations. But it's also kind of modeled on a bait clicking website. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but click here for the 12 cutest cats on the internet this week, the 8 most beautiful waterfalls in China. So we kind of mimicked that, but had articles like 500 reasons why the telecom company in Mexico is crap, or 12 ways in which your data is being used without you knowing it, or take the quiz and find out which monopolist you are. But there's only one answer, right? So it's, and so we made this website. It does exist on the internet, but we also modified routers to have this website in them. And so when you connect to this router, you're actually not connected to the internet. That's why the project is called This Is Not the Internet. But the name of the network that the router gives out makes you believe that you're connecting to the internet. So it will say, free Wi-Fi or connect here. But once you connect, the only thing that you get is this. So we did that to a couple of routers and then put them up in different places in the center of Mexico City. A couple of, like 1 or 2 museums that agreed to help us, a market, some coffee shops for an afternoon. And so created just this occupation of this virtual space of the downtown Mexico City, the Wi-Fi, where people thought they would be connecting to the internet, but got our propaganda instead. So this was Mexico 2014. Now we're going to go back to Brazil 2013. No more beaches, right? Like 2013 started in São Paulo, hikes and bus fares. Some people went out to complain. They got beat up by the police. Then that kind of grew bigger and bigger and bigger. That throughout July, that by the end, there were these manifestations in all of the major cities with millions and millions of people. And it wasn't about public transit anymore. It was about public funds, corruption, and more. This was more of like, more specific kind of political complaint compared to the 2011 version of the go into the street. And towards the end of 2013, beginning of 2014, things were a little bit calmer. And a group of artists, curators, one of which has been an artist in residency here, Lucas Bombozzi, organized this event that centered about an art exhibition, but called Multitude, that centered around an art exhibition of people that used crowds as kind of their medium. It kind of sounds bad, but or that documented crowds, or that also had works relating to their country's respective, spring. But in addition to the art exhibition, also had talks and workshops and a little bit of getting people together to talk about the post-mortem of this in some ways. Not that it was completely done, but this happened during the World Cup, and it was a little bit different by then. And so with the friend that did the megaphone thing, we got invited to participate, and so we created something similar with megaphone, but instead of just being able to send a message to it, you could also record some complaint or message, and it looked like a weapon. So it would move around the exhibition and point to different parts and shout whatever you had told it to shout. And there were a couple of them spread throughout the exhibition. The most popular one was by the speaker section, where they had talks and classes, because once people got bored, they started sending messages to the thing to complain about the talks. We don't have one here, so good or bad. This is I run a tight ship here. No voice from the audience. If you guys have questions, you can ask or wait until the end. But And so during this event, talking to more people about kind of the protest and some of the imagery and tactics and everything, that something that struck me as particularly interesting was that during the manifestations, the government tried to make it hard for people to do this by outlawing, you can't get people on the street, you can't get a lot of people on the street, you can't wear masks, you can't play songs on the street, and you can't wear vinegar or have vinegar on you, because that helped with the tear gas smoke. But the thing about not being able to be on the street, not being able to play music or wear masks, that's also what we do for a lot of our parties, traditional parties. And when we gather for these things, it's by the millions. So this is New Year's Eve in Rio. This is Carnival in Recife. This is a protest in Recife. This is people going to a soccer match or a football game. And this is people protesting. And so, to me, there was this interesting ambiguity of what would, if these laws actually passed, of what would be allowed and what would be considered illegal, given that this is how we take the subway at the end of the day. And to me, there's a lot more violence in this, which is what people were complaining about, than in this. And so this idea of saying, oh, we're not protesting, we're actually celebrating a saint, which is what people were doing. So they would play one song of protest and one song for a saint, and then one song for carnival, and then a protest song. And maybe dress up like they were in carnival. Like this here is a lot more colorful than some, black bloc, whatever attire. And so these ideas of the ambiguous songs and hiding things within the other songs, and the violence of everyday kind of São Paulo, is what gave me the idea for the project that I worked on here, which I'm calling Word Traitor Radio. And in some ways, it's kind of like a documentation of what happened 2 years ago, because it uses texts from tweets. And I started collecting newspaper articles as well, but I couldn't automate that as well. But tweets, collected a whole bunch of tweets from July of 2 years ago, and used commonly occurring words or themes, phrases from that to modify traditional Brazilian songs, to create our own sort of song of protest hidden within some, traditional Brazilian song. And I have it running inside this radio that also has a transmitter. And so it generates these songs and transmits them out loud or in the FM spectrum. So there's also something kind of hidden in this object. And I can turn it on and we can hear it. I don't know how well we'll be able to hear that one, but then I can play it through the computer and I'll translate what it's saying because it's all in Portuguese. There's 3 people in the audience that speak Portuguese, I'm sure, having a blast. But if you want, I can play some more on the computer. There's like a short one that might sound familiar.
alma que agora está no seu meu bem. Fiz meu protesto quando é dia, já é demais o meu planar. Quero fazer aquela rua de alegria, quero de novo morar. Lá, 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 lá. Quero fazer aquela rua de alegria, quero de novo morar.
So, that is like somewhat maybe recognizable to some people, yeah, like a carnival tune. And the lyrics go something like, sadness, please go away, my soul that is crying is seeking its demise, or is seeing my demise. You made your home in my heart, my pity is enough, I want back my life of happiness where I can sing again. That's the original one. When doing this, I kind of knew this, but turns out a lot of Brazilian popular songs on the surface are about love or sadness. Some of them already have hidden messages in them. They are about sadness, about the military dictatorship back in the 70s, but the version that was sung says something like, giant, please go ahead. And giant is what people were referring to Brazil as at the time, like the giant woke up. My soul that is waking up is being a manifestation. You made my protest your home, my pity's enough. I want to make the streets happy again, I want change. La 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 la. But, and then another song that I took the time to sort of translate, I'll have to play a little video just for people to get the rhythm. This was something that was written and first released in the 70s when we did have a military dictatorship. And it surprised, and the video we're going to see is actually from the 80s when things were a little bit more relaxed. But I'll sing the lyrics, actually, the original ones. I've never seen the trails of a snake or the back of a werewolf. If I fight, I am in trouble. If I run, I am in trouble. Because I am a man, because I am a man. Boy, I am a man with capital M. Sung in falsetto, so it was obviously about some kind of homosexual
Sucesso
encounter
do
or
disco e
desire.
do show que ele está fazendo no Canecão no Rio. Homem com H, nem Mato Grosso.
Nunca vi rastro de cobra, nem couro de lobisomem. Se correr o bicho pega, se ficar o bicho come. Porque eu sou é homem, porque eu sou é homem. Menina, eu sou é homem, menina, eu sou é homem, como sou.
Okay, before someone comes after us for downloading things on YouTube. And so this already had, this was on the radio. It was, he's singing about a snake and a werewolf and how he's a man, but not really. And then the version that came out of my radio is the World Cup is not coming, neither is the back of a werewolf. If I fight, I am in trouble. If I change, I wake up. Because I go to the street, because I go to the street, boy, I go to the street, a street with capital M. And then the song is actually very repetitive, but and so in some ways this, like I was saying, it acts as kind of this documentation for something that already happened, but I also see it as this kind of framework of occupying this radio space, where it is a small pirate radio station, but it has input from people at large. So we could set it up to be listening to tweets now, here, and changing songs. People could change songs manually and then submit it to this thing and it will sing it out loud. And then just to kind of close off with the quote that I found from Bertelsbrecht while reading about sort of history of different media and who controls them, and that the radio would be the finest possible communication apparatus in public life if it knew how to receive as well as to transmit, how to let the listener speak as well as hear, how to bring him into a relationship instead of isolating him. Which is funny because the internet is supposed to be sort of this, but then at times it also doesn't feel like this anymore. So, he was already complaining about the things I complain about the internet back in 1932. So yeah, that's my work, my presentation.
Thank you for your presentation, Thiago. I have some first questions about your projects, and especially how they relate to the public space. Yeah. We're gonna have to share this mic, so. Okay. I'm wondering, many of the let's say the examples of your work you've been showing us are actually quite triggering, and they're playful, but they're also quite sharp. And I'm also wondering, were there ever any, let's say, public response to your work, rather than, let's say, or outside of the Twitter realm, with your sonori weapon?
Let me think. With the weapon, no, not physical manifestation there. Because, with, let's say, the one with the routers, that was, it was a group that was, let's say, being part of this event that we threw to get together the routers and everything. And so there was a bit of a physical, let's say, going out into the city and doing something. But it didn't trigger any going out into the street, you know. But
still, the website, This Is Not the Internet, it must have, been very puzzling for anybody who thought, nice, a little bit of free Wi-Fi when having my, Starbucks coffee. Was there any public debate, or did it stir up anything, or did you have any desired effect? And if not, how do you think that, what do you have to do? What do you actually have to do to raise the attention of people that try to log into free internet?
Yeah, that it was hard to measure who was accessing and what they thought of it later, and to know on that one. The sound weapon had traditional media attention. That did get covered. That probably was why it got taken down. But with the collective, with a lot of the projects, and then a little bit of my personal practice, I don't think that this will necessarily cause a mass effect, let's say. But what we're doing is creating this in groups that then can actually take a discussion. And yes, no, we haven't, the Commission for Discussion of Intangible Public Spaces, we haven't met since November of 2014. But the idea is to have our little action as a way to actually build this community that is thinking about this stuff. And same with the radio is something that I would like to do in terms of building a community that would want to use music or sound, or specifically hacking pop songs to discuss some of these issues, let's say. But you saw the tanks that full spectrum dominance, right? We can't, I'm not going to go up against that.
No, can't beat them. So I think it's incredibly interesting what you're doing. It also makes me think that maybe it's easier to get arrested in public space with, maybe a colorful flag than subverting internet traffic, or let's say wireless traffic, in coffee shops around Mexico City. That's just a thought. Yeah. I'm also wondering if that's true. I'm interested also if somebody from the audience maybe has a question. By now, any of the projects that Josephine?
So would you gather your work under this flag of tactical media, and why, if
does your work, do you consider it tactical media? If so, why?
I haven't called it technical media. But reading about technical media, how a lot of the people that participate in it say, we'll define it, and then the media changes, and then, and so in some maybe very broad definition of it, which is gonna feel weird of me giving this here in this room, but in what it's mixing public space. Okay, and let me finish this thought. It's mixing public space, it's activism, art, and with the intent of building a community to talk about these issues that it could fit under. But what is tactical media today compared to in the 90s, or not comfortable saying that yes, or but so the thought that came to me halfway through that sentence, that these are what I would consider some artistic vein of the work that I do in the collective, or like the one with the megaphones was in a gallery. The collective, we have a kind of educational aspect to our work, but we're also involved with other more traditional activism collectives, or providing infrastructure for, let's say, during manifestations both in Brazil and Mexico, of providing like a local network for people to communicate with, and so that might be where we have a more of a participating in the mass, and not just a bit of an art-centered or discussion community-centered kind of action.
I saw another question in the back.
I was just wondering more like, because you kind of already gave me the answer I wanted with the previous answer. But I was just wondering if you also have, because you mentioned like, with the radio I kind of can understand more, but you mentioned like Twitter many times, but so just if you have like a more critical view, because you're using these platforms, and the radio is a platform, Twitter is a platform, and if you also have a critical position towards the platform itself, not just about, because they also have embedded all these ideologies in
yeah. And that's there is a project where we kind of create a little interface that might look like Twitter, but it's anonymous, and it runs on the little routers, and it's mobile, and so that the not relying on other people's networks. We're sort of thinking about that as well, and even for this project, which was, I want some tweets from 2 years ago. Twitter has them. They don't give that to you. You have to buy it from them. I didn't. I found some other way of getting them, but even if you posted them, you might not own it. And so I only have a Twitter account, so I can do stuff like this, and if it not always works even, so it's not enough. You have to have a Twitter account and money.
I was wondering, this tactical media, it's about sort of hacking or using existing structures, let's say, and like the example you gave of the abstract empty billboards with like the washing machine engine, like how did that work? Like how did you get commissioned for that, or did you hack that space and like install the washing machine engine yourself? Or?
We did install the machine ourselves. There was this community center in that park that gave us electricity and a phone line, or a network cable, but they did not own that structure. They said, yeah, use it, we'll try to help you as much as we can, but
so you did interfere or like hacked public space, as in these objects, let's say, by adding the engine, and it wasn't part of an exhibition or like sort of preset regulation-free zone, let's say.
In that museum community space, there was an official, let's say, posters saying that this event was happening.
Yeah.
They were behind it, but there was a bit of a, we don't approve of this officially, but go ahead and do it. Which other, there are other projects that we do that are also kind of like this.
Yes, Ilka's remark about how easy it is to get arrested in physical public space versus digital public space sort of already pointed toward this distinction between these two kinds of public spaces, and I was wondering if you have any thoughts on maybe the differences between them and how they function, or the similarities.
I don't know if everybody got that. So is there many differences still between the public space and the physical public space, as in the streets, and the virtual public space, as in the internet? What are your thoughts on this?
That someone who kind of saw the internet in like the 90s, where it was kind of this place that felt anonymous. You could go, you have a fake name, you say whatever you want, and how now, in some ways, it's more dangerous to do things there than in real life, because there's a history of it, right? You can't say I didn't do that or it wasn't me. And not just on the stuff you're putting out, but what is being collected. In terms of that distinction, I'd say it's different, but virtual to me feels more dangerous to do this sort of stuff almost. With the washing machine, I could just run away, and it's a $5 washing machine, let's say, right? But if it gets to the point where it's, there's some data that knows where I'm going, where I've been, what my credit card is, or whatever, then that's where I feel it's safer in public, or in public space, physical.
On the other hand, only 2 years ago, the Brazilian government, a modern country, there's no official regime structure of any kind, was able to outlaw any sign of public protest that could have been confused with any kind of Brazilian culture that takes place in the streets. As you pointed out in one of our talks together, carnival and other manifestations are a very big part, like inherent to Brazilian culture. So, in the Netherlands, we have an outlaw on public drinking outside of Queen's Day. But that's kind of a ridiculous, maybe let's say, exception to many other inside manifestations. How does it feel then to say maybe the internet could be even more dangerous, even though a huge country like yours tried to outlaw public activity and demonstrations? Maybe it's a little bit far-fetched as a resemblance, but
well, I think in terms of some of this work is how I feel, but and when it comes to I mean, yes, obviously they still have physical power. They were, beating up people, and they can do that. But there's maybe a different kind of danger in terms of, if, like today, I might be doing something that is not illegal, and if it becomes illegal and there's a history of that, and so maybe me saying, no, it's more dangerous. Maybe it's a different kind of, and yes, even if you do things online, they come after you physically. It's still very physical.
I think there's many, let's say, afterthoughts that maybe many people here have on the internet as a public space. It's very ambiguous. It's very two-faced. Of course, the internet doesn't exist of only public space anymore. There's a lot of walled gardens, and let's say the social media don't have URLs like public websites do, for example. Well, maybe we'll just extend these thoughts in our public conversation later. And anybody who has a thought on this and how you can actually interfere or interact and subvert traditional uses of these technologies, it's very welcome to mingle in the conversation later. So for now, I just want to ask for an applause for your interesting artist talk. Thiago, thank you.